Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jayom Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parvajakacharya Astar Sata Sri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Gaur Premananda. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 26, Fundamental Principles of Material Nature, Text 38. Vāyoś cha sparśa-tanmātrād rūpam daiveritād abhūt samutthitaṁ tatas tejaś cakṣuḥ rūpopalambhanam vāyoś sparśa-tanmātrād, rūpam daiveritād abhūt, samutthitaṁ tatas tejaḥ, cakṣuḥ rūpopalambhanam, vāyoś sparśa-tanmātrād, rūpam daiveritād abhūt, samutthitaṁ tatas tejaś, cakṣuḥ rūpopalambhanam, vāyoś sparśa-tanmātrād, rūpam daiveritād abhūt, samutthitaṁ tatas tejaś, cakṣuḥ rūpopalambhanam, Vaishnavis. Sparśa-tanmātrād, rūpam daiveritād abhūt, samutthitaṁ tatas tejaś, cakṣuḥ rūpopalambhanam, vāyoḥ, from air, cha, and sparśa-tanmātrād, which evolves from the subtle element touch. Rūpam, form. Daiva-īritāt, according to destiny. Abhūt, evolved. Samutthitam, arose. Tataḥ, from that. Tejaḥ, fire. Cakṣuḥ, sense of sight. Rūpa, color and form. Upalambhanam, perceiving. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. By interactions of the air and the sensations of touch, one receives different forms according to destiny. By evolution of such forms, there is fire, and the eye sees different forms and color. Purport. because of destiny, the touch sensation, the interactions of air, and the situation of the mind, which is produced of the ethereal element, one receives a body according to his previous activities. Needless to say, a living entity transmigrates from one form to another. His form changes according to destiny and by the arrangement of a superior authority, which controls the interactions of air and the mental situation. Form is the combination of different types of sense perception. Predestined activities are the plans of the mental situation and the interaction of air. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Cakṣū Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudhi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, we're now studying the chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam called Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. So, why is that? Basically, we're meant to understand our position. We find ourselves in a certain situation in this world. We perceive the world through our senses, and it has, by interacting with this material world, we undergo certain experiences. It's like sometimes the example is given by Srila Prabhupada that a child will see the moon and want to catch it. So the mother will give the child a mirror, and in the mirror, the child can see the reflection of the moon. I think, okay, now I've captured the moon. So, in a similar way, when we start entertaining the idea that we can enjoy ourselves separately from Krishna and that we can enjoy whatever is available to us that we can perceive, then that is a kind of illusion. The child really doesn't have the moon, so we don't really have the ability to enjoy ourselves separately from Krishna in the spiritual world with the spiritual energy. So Krishna gives us a reflection, a perverted reflection of that ultimate reality in a form that we can interact with. And exactly how he does that, he's explaining through Lord Kapila in this discussion with Devahuti. So it is meant to instruct her, and through her, us, on our actual situation in this world. We're learning how it's produced, how it is a reflection of an ultimate spiritual reality, but it's got this feature that if we want to interact with it through our knowledge acquiring and working senses, this is how the perverted reflection is generated. So Krishna didn't start out wanting to make an alternative reality like this. He does it because we want to enjoy separately. And we can't enjoy separately from Krishna on the spiritual level of reality. So there has to be some alternate reality for us to live in. And how it's produced is a mystery. People, apart from accepting the knowledge that Krishna gives, like in the Srimad Bhagavatam and through other sources, if people don't wish to accept that source of knowledge, they're kind of left on their own to speculate about it. Say, no, we don't want to accept knowledge that comes down to us from a perfect source in the form originally of sound vibration, but it's recorded in the form of the Vedic literature, texts like the Srimad Bhagavatam. If we don't want to consider that, and we think it's all just happening on its own, Jagat Ahur Anishwaram, Krishna explains in the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, there's a certain type of philosopher who thinks that let's not consider the idea of any controller or designer or any non-material substance. Let's just accept that matter is the only thing there is, gross matter, and we'll figure it out somehow. But it's like if you're given a kit to make something, like when I was younger, friend of mine built his own shortwave radio from a kit. But if somehow or other, the store or the company mails you the kit in a box and it gets damaged during the course of being sent to you, and the instruction manual drops out and some of the parts of the kit drop out. When you get the kit and you try to build the radio, figuring it out on your own, you're never going to be able to do it because, first of all, you don't have the proper instruction, and second, you don't have all the parts. So in the toolkit of the modern physicalist scientist, they don't have, they're working without the instruction manual and they're working without all the parts. In the Sankhya philosophy, we're being given all the parts that are necessary to come up with the world that we experience. They just have the gross physical elements in which they understand things in a certain way. And from that, they have to explain, where do you get consciousness? Nobody has figured that out. I've been going to scientific conferences about the origin of consciousness for about 30 years now, and they keep saying, we haven't got it all figured out. Got nothing really figured out about the origin of consciousness. And then, even if they had consciousness, they can't explain why we have individual consciousness. Maybe somehow or other there could be some ultimate thing, consciousness. So they really don't have, they never are able to come to a proper conclusion using their methodology because they don't have all of the parts. In addition to the gross physical elements, there are subtle material elements, mind, intelligence, false ego, the subtle senses. These things are there. And also the sense objects are there. as we're learning, we're learning how each element is produced. But not only is the element produced, but the sense related to it is there, and the sense object that is related to it is there. Therefore, we're able to understand how the material elements are actually generated from subtle sense objects. And we can understand why we can perceive them, because senses are part of the package, the initial set in the kit, by which this material experience is generated. I mean, it is a big mystery to science how matter has this quality of being perceived in terms of five senses, taste, smell, touch, sight. What is the other one? Taste, smell, touch, hearing. Hearing. Thank you, Archita. So it's amazing that matter has this quality of being perceivable through these sense modalities. It's really quite astonishing. So the whole process, however, begins with the more subtle elements, like we've been hearing. First there is sound, from which comes ether and the sense of hearing, and then comes air, which comes from the sense of touch, and the touching organ, the skin. So in this verse, we're learning that from that comes fire and the subtle visual sense objects that allow us to perceive different forms and color, as being noted here. Not black and white, but variety of colors. So it's kind of interesting that there are some parallels with some of the discoveries of modern science. It's like sometimes, almost by accident, they stumble upon something that's really true, in the sense that it corresponds to the realities being described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Like, they have this idea that everything comes from what they call a singularity, which means they've looked at the universe and they've seen everything is kind of expanding. So then they think, well, then if you wind it back in time, eventually you come to this tiny particle of infinite density, infinite heat, like that. And the first thing that happens, they believe, in their Big Bang theory is that space is created, which is exactly what the Bhagavatam is saying here. From false ego comes ether and sound at the very beginning. And they also say that, in the beginning, the first thing that is created is space. Because if you don't have space, you can't have anything. You can't have movement of thought progressively, and you can't have physical movement either. So it's kind of interesting that some of them have stumbled upon that idea. Because, like as we were hearing a few verses ago, ether provides, or space provides the, got to use the same term, space, or the field in which thought and action can take place. And the time factor is also there. Without the time factor, there's no possibility of sequential change. So, and then they say from that space, gases developed. Hydrogen and helium. So we say air. What's air? Air is that combination of gases of oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and so on, other gases. So basically they're saying the same thing. From space comes gases. What they're missing, of course, is touch and the sense organ of touch. That they haven't figured out, and consciousness, which comes from the atma or the soul, that's missing from their toolkit. So they're not able to figure out exactly how all these things happen, but they have, in principle, something that is on the right track. They're just missing a whole lot of elements and considerations. So then they say that these gases started accumulating, and some of them, they develop such a mass of gas that it ignites into fire. So they've got it. First ether or space, then air, simple gases, which combine together and ignite into stars. In other words, fire. And then they say some of the stars last only a short period of time. They expand and then they contract and they explode into what they call supernovas. And during that process, they say heavier elements are developed. Helium and hydrogen are considered to be light elements. Those are the first elements. Then when the first generation of stars turns into supernovas, and in the heat of that, the elements are combined to produce heavier elements like oxygen and carbon and all the heavier elements like iron and things like that. With each progressive generation, they're developed. And among the heavy elements is oxygen. So you take H2O, water is produced. I was studying, they have studies that have been done that show there are stars that are ejecting huge streams of water that go into outer space and are frozen. And scientists are very amazed about how much water there is on Earth. They can't explain it. So they've been saying that how the water came was through asteroids made of ice that bombarded the Earth and gave all the water. But I'm not saying that that's true, although if you look at the description of how the Ganges came to Earth, it describes how it originally comes from a hole in the shells of the universe. Some of the causal ocean kind of comes down, and then it's carried, it's stated, in millions of vimanas or airplanes till it comes to the earth. So, there are reflections of Vedic truths, although very perverted in the understandings of modern science. So you have the same basic progression: ether, gases, fire, or plasma, as it's called in modern astronomy and astrophysics. It's like plasma is superheated gases. So all the stars and luminaries that we see are made of this plasma or fire or superheated gases. And then from that come the heavier elements, including water, and even heavier elements that make up the earth. So it's kind of interesting that there's some parallels there. But the main thing is we're meant to understand that we're not accidental creatures in an accidental universe. There actually is a plan and a purpose to this universe, and it's not just out there belonging to nobody, and we have a right to use everything in any way that we want without reference to the source and owner of it. Ishavasyamidam sarvam yat kinchad jagatam jagat. Krishna, it's explained in the Isopanishad that everything is actually the energy of Krishna, janmadyasya yataha, from aham sarvasya prabhavo mata sarvam pravartate. It's a message that's repeated throughout the Vedic literature, that everything is coming from a supreme source. It's his property, and it's here for a certain purpose. Actually, the universe has a dual purpose. If we want to pursue the project of independently trying to enjoy apart from Krishna, well, we can do that, but we have to pay the price for that. And the price is, yes, you can do that, but you're always going to be in the cycle of birth and death. Janma mrityu jaravyati dukkha doshana darshanam. So go ahead, pursue that. Get a higher low position, but you're still in the cycle of birth and death, and you're never going to be satisfied. Or, as Krishna comes so many times in so many different forms to tell us that really, you're not an independent enjoyer. Jivaras rūpaṁ krishnera nityadas. You're by constitution my servant. And that's not such a bad thing. You can become free from the cycle of birth and death, enjoy unlimited, ever-increasing, transcendental happiness, have full knowledge of everything you need to know or have desired to know. So that opportunity is also there for us to do that. But if we, as we have, taken a step in our journey away from pursuing a phantasmagoria, and we're now trying to advance towards understanding and acting on the basis of understanding the absolute truth. Well, we have to understand some things about our situation now, And that's what we're being given in this part of the Srimad Bhagavatam, an understanding of this material nature that we're embedded in at the present moment, and understanding that it's an energy, it is energies of Krishna. It's coming from him. He's giving us the opportunity to understand our proper situation. So I'll stop there. Questions, comments? Rabindranath?
Yeah, you mentioned how sometimes the scientists, they stumble across different things that match up with the Vedic understanding of the universe and elements, but can it just also be that sometimes they hear these things from the Vedic literature and they just don't acknowledge that that's where they got it from, or they hear it from another scientist who heard it from Vedic literature like that?
That's also possible. Like some of the physicists involved in the development of quantum mechanics, have acknowledged some influence from their encounters with the Upanishads and things like that. So that is a possibility. I mean, sometimes Srila Prabhupada would say, well, Darwin got this idea of evolution from the Puranas, so he would say like that. To actually demonstrate that, you'd have to go back, examine his library, what books he had or were available to him, and so on. But as we can see, Srila Prabhupada correctly uses the term evolution in terms of the development of the elements. It's an evolutionary process on the cosmological level. You begin from the more simple, subtle things, and gradually the other elements evolve. So yeah, there's some scope for that idea. Of course, okay. In one sense, it's like, sometimes they say, oh, we know science is imperfect, but we're getting closer to the truth. That implies they know what the truth is. So we're like students who've gotten the answers to the quiz. We can find out what the truth is and make a judgment about whether someone is getting closer to it or further from it.
What would you say about people who, scientists who have come to the conclusion that a transcendent, intelligent, active, supreme being is the best explanation for the origin and function of everything, but they're not Hare Krishna devotees? How do they kind of fit in the picture?
Well, I'd see if they've actually explained everything, including consciousness. That's... So I would see how complete their understanding is and what, if any, parts of the kit they are yet to discover.
Isn't the study of the material elements also consciousness? Because we were just reading about, air, subtle forms of energy. Maybe it's constituted as bodily consciousness, but isn't it still consciousness? And if it is, then aren't we trying to illustrate something deeper than consciousness?
You're saying the elements are conscious?
like there's consciousness, that we're conscious of, these subtle elements, or like in biology, they're studying moving atoms. Those are all conscious. So it is studying consciousness, isn't it?
Well, ultimately, sarvam kalvidam brahma, everything is spiritual and conscious in nature. But there was a very interesting conversation I read with Srila Prabhupada. He said that type of reasoning is something that's for a higher stage, that on the level of our preaching to ordinary people, we heavily make this distinction between matter and consciousness. So we're actually interested in the study of the soul and this relationship with the Supreme Soul. Mamaivam so jiva loke, jiva bhuta sanatana. The soul is the eternal fragmental part of Krishna. And Krishna is conscious, individual, and personal. So the individual soul is conscious, individual, and personal. He said the soul is conscious and is consciousness. Kind of hard to wrap your mind around. But, the elements as being described here in the Sankhya philosophy are not themselves conscious. Even the subtle sense objects are not conscious. Like taste is not conscious. Sound is not conscious. The senses aren't conscious. What's conscious is the soul, and the consciousness pervades this body, but not all bodies. Our consciousness, our soul, is limited to our perspective. Archita?
Thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to touch back on Vigilant's question, because we have to be careful how we use words. When they say evolution, they're thinking about something random clashing of different elements, and all of a sudden you come up with a living entity. Whereas when Prabhupada uses the word evolution, it's not like that. He's talking exactly about this Sankhya process, which is a planned revelation. It's not just random. The Sankhya philosophy is not presenting something random, that just randomly from sound comes this, or randomly from ether comes that. It's not at all random. It's a planned revelation, planned unfolding of one thing from another thing. Whereas when the scientists use the word evolution, they're thinking it's something random. You just have random collision of atoms and molecules, and all of a sudden, boom, you have some single cell creature, and then that randomly expands into a more complex form and stuff. But we're not talking about anything random here. This is all very planned, uncovering, revelation, unfolding that goes on time after time after time. It's not just a one-time thing. When the universe is wound up, and everything is wound up in the body of Mahavishnu, the whole process starts again in a planned way. It's not, random. So we have to be careful when we say, we seem to be on the same track. They say evolution and we say evolution. It's not at all the same. It's vastly different.
That's a point that I often make. We're different than material evolutionists, intelligent design theorists, and creationists. That the human form and all the different bodily forms are always available. Like you said, even after the universe is wound up, when the universes are manifested again there are these different forms of life. And it's a process that's been going on since time immemorial. So we're kind of eternalist in that sense, not creationist or design theorists or random interactionist. Good point, Archita. Haribol. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.